the Center for the Study of Tennesseans in War. We preserve veteran stories and we share those stories. And we're privileged today to have Captain Connor Pearce with us to share his story. Welcome to the center.
Thanks, sir. It's good to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit, first of all, about where you grew up? And can you kind of paint a picture for our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So, grew up in Bellevue, Tennessee, is where I spent some of my younger years. Went to elementary school and middle school in that area. Towards high school, moved to Franklin, Tennessee.
Oh, yeah. I know what Franklin's like. What was Bellevue like to grow up?
Honestly, incredible. At the time, we had a little mall, and that was the center attraction. That and the little Pizza Hut.
Mm-hmm.
So I grew up playing soccer. So all I ever really knew was the soccer fields and the mall during the times they had the little fair. But we had an incredible little house in a quaint little neighborhood. So it was special. It was really, really special.
Family?
Yes, sir. Yeah, so I've got a mom, a dad, 3 older sisters, which was a bit surprising.
Three older sisters.
3 older sisters that treated me very,
Any
very
brothers
well.
at all?
No brothers
Just you
at all.
and a bunch of girls in the household.
Yep,
okay.
Absolutely. So growing up was fun at times, and at times it wasn't as fun.
Yeah. Any military service in your family background?
Yes, sir. So my grandfather on my father's side is a technical sergeant in the Air Force. My father was a GWAT veteran himself. Obviously, I have service now. And then my mom was a volunteer in the Tennessee State Guard.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah.
a pretty extensive list in the immediate family. I'm sure there's more as we progress down the line.
Yeah. So Bellevue, and then you moved to Franklin. Franklin's a beautiful place south of Nashville. How long were you in Franklin?
I was in Franklin, 2008 to 12, I guess. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty much all of my high school years.
Okay.
And then graduated from Franklin High and moved down to Chattanooga to start school there.
Yeah. At UT Chattanooga?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And in the ROTC program
yes,
there?
Sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what made you want to get into the ROTC program?
Yeah, so honestly, I really didn't have aspirations growing up. Growing up in a military family, one would think like naturally want to do this, but growing up, all I wanted to do was play soccer. And I loved being on a team, and I realized I could use kind of that team mentality to become a leader. So tried to find ways to become a leader as I was in high school. And one day it just kind of dawned on me that I think this is what I'm called to do. I always had something in my heart to serve others, to be of service. And so, right after high school, I joined the National Guard just a few months after graduating. And then naturally through that, I found the ROTC program, and things just clicked. And I realized that that's what I want to do. And here we are 11 years later.
National Guard, Army ROTC at UT Chattanooga. And once you got through your ROTC program and you're given your list for your top 5 choices, did you have anything in mind as you're going through your ROTC program? Are you thinking, I want to do this?
Yeah, so I was an infantry guy. I went through infantry basic training in AIT, or otherwise known as OSID. So naturally I wanted to be an infantryman. I wanted to be the guy on the front line. And funny enough, I almost dropped out of ROTC because I was like, I'm ready to just stay enlisted. Glad I didn't do that. My instructor at the time really kind of shifted me back to that. But as a junior, when you're doing the preferencing, I had infantry towards the top. I had military intelligence, and then field artillery. Kind of wanted to stay more towards the front. Kind of wanted to, be the war fighter that's kind of shaping operations towards the front of the formation.
Yeah. Was there something going on around that? You mentioned it several times about wanting to be an infantryman and wanting to be on the front line. Was there something that made you want to get into the action that was going on in world events or politics of the time, or what's going into your decisions there?
Yeah, so we're still pretty involved in GWAT at that point. And I found through some situations that I work very well under pressure. So I figured, hey, why not put me in a stressful environment to where, my leadership can thrive, or I can set that example for others to follow. So that was kind of my thing. And, honestly, I really like playing in the dirt and digging holes and being with the troops. So it's just something special.
Okay. And so what did you get?
So I ended up branching chemical corps.
Okay.
So it's quite the funny story. You go into ROTC and you expect everything to work out in your favor, and I graduated number 2 of 29 in my class, so you're kind of told, hey, you're going to get what you want, and unfortunately it didn't work out that way.
Yep.
But you know, as we'll continue to talk, it's been the biggest blessing to do what I've done and be a part of the things that I've done.
Do you remember where you ranked?
Nationally?
The chemical, as far as your list?
It was number 6.
It was number 6.
Number 6.
Okay.
So
You didn't get first choice, didn't get second, third, fourth, fifth, you got your 6th choice.
yeah, the way that the algorithm worked that year, it just so happened that top 10% cadets, either you get your number 1 through 3 or you get your 4, 5, 6. I happen to be in the latter.
Yep.
But you know, my story is to tell that you may have not gotten what you wanted, but you know, here we are now 8 years active duty later, and it's been an incredible blessing.
Yeah, sometimes you don't get what you want, you get what you need.
Exactly.
And what happened next? Then where did you go from UT Chattanooga?
Yep. So I volunteered to be a lieutenant instructor at the camp that the soon-to-be graduates go to. So I started active duty about 6 days after graduating college. So it was a pretty quick transition to Fort Knox to be a part of their cadet summer training. Spent about 50 days there, and then found myself in Fort Leonard Wood for my basic officer leadership course.
What did you think about Fort Knox? I've heard different things about that.
At the time, it was really, really hot.
Yeah.
This was I think the 2nd or 3rd year maybe that they had transitioned everything from JBLM Washington to Fort Knox. So the infrastructure wasn't quite there. The buildings we found ourselves working in needed some help.
Yeah.
So a lot of sweaty days sitting in buildings without air conditioning, but getting to try to find your way as a leader, as a brand new second lieutenant was exciting, and at that point I was just ready to kickstart the career.
Yes. And what do you remember about the people that you were with at Fort Knox? Anything stick out to you about your time there or the people that you're with?
Yeah, so the instructors, I can't remember the names off the top of my head, but the instructors were incredible. Knowing that we're brand new lieutenants, we do not know much of anything, let alone how to tie our shoes. So kind of shaping us early, saying, hey, this is how you need to look at things. This is the perspective you need to have. And then I went to cadet summer training with a couple of lieutenants that I soon found myself serving with. They tried to stick the folks that were going to BOLIC at certain times together. So one in particular, Jenny Metzler, she's a fellow chemical soldier. Also Ranger Tab, which is incredible. She was one of the early ones as a female. So we found ourselves working together from the get-go. So it was pretty cool to see, and we're still friends to this day. So
that's awesome. And so after Fort Knox, you're off to where?
Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Okay.
Yeah. It's
Why there?
So that's where the home of the Chemical Corps.
Okay.
So there's Chemical Corps, a military police.
Yep.
So they all just kind of train in the same. They call it the MISCO. Their Center of Excellence there.
Yep. And what was that experience like?
Fun.
Yeah.
It was fun. It was, I went into this job not knowing exactly what a chemical officer does.
Yeah. Did you have much science background?
No.
Okay.
Oh no.
Okay.
A criminal justice background.
Okay.
So I was like, all right, I don't know what this is going to entail, but I know that it's going to be difficult, but it's going to be fun. So going to BOLIC, you learn kind of basic officer stuff. Then you start learning how to plan, then you start learning kind of what your job actually means, and there's a couple ways of looking at it. There's kind of the battalion staff role. You're kind of supporting operations, and then there's the other side that you are the one actioning targets, whether it's as a platoon leader, company commander. So it's kind of cool to see both sides of it and kind of learn all right, here's where I can add value. Here's where I can add value.
Did that shift your thinking? Did you start to see the other side of it and think, well, maybe I don't want to be on the front lines, maybe I don't want to be in the action, or were you still pretty interested in getting in the dirt?
I was still really interested in being towards the front.
Okay.
And kind of leading a formation. Okay. And so it didn't really, that never really came to fruition until I got to my first assignment. I realized that I'm exactly where I need to be.
Yeah, yeah. So, where from Missouri? And by the way, at this time, are you in communication with your family? And what are they thinking about your service after UT Chattanooga?
Yeah, so my family has always been really supportive. I think naturally, being the youngest, being the only boy, you find yourself getting supported in a lot of ways, but even more so as I, looked at being an officer. So after
What your sisters have to say about it?
nothing but support.
Okay.
I think they didn't know exactly what they were supporting at the time because I didn't know what I was doing much.
But you wanted to do it, and that was
absolutely.
enough, that was enough for them.
And to this day, they're nothing but supportive, and I'm so thankful for it. But so after Missouri, went to the 101st Airborne Division in Fort Campbell. Found myself in 3rd Brigade Combat Team, the Rocketsons. And this is where I really developed a passion for what I did. I showed up and was told, hey, you're going to deploy to Afghanistan. So, cool, let's do this thing.
Yeah.
And then 3 days out from the manifesting.
What was your understanding about Afghanistan at that point, or did you have a larger understanding of the conflict, or you just showed up and they told you you're going to Afghanistan and that's it?
A little bit of both. Fundamentally, I knew what we were trying to do. At the time, we were kind of the ebbs and flows on what's going to happen next. I knew at this point.
This was what year?
This was late 2016. So I knew the transition was beginning to happen. Looking at surge versus how we were sorting to really encompass using the A&A and the other support structure there. So I knew I was going to support operations. From a chemical perspective, I knew that doing my job was relatively low, but more or less I'd be just a staff officer there to kind of help shape how the maneuver element was doing their mission. But so I showed up about 3 days prior to manifesting. They're like, "Hey, you're not going, but there's this platoon that you can take as a platoon leader." And I was like, "Okay, what is it?" And, they're saying it's the Dismounted Reconnaissance Platoon for CBRN. And I said, "Absolutely." Knew nothing about it. Didn't know where they lived, but I was like, "Absolutely, I'll take it." So spent 23 months doing that, and that's where I really, really found the passion.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're in Afghanistan, and you're with this dismounted recon unit in Afghanistan?
No, so they canceled Afghanistan.
They canceled the Afghanistan
Yeah,
completely?
they reverted me to the platoon.
Oh, okay. I thought it was moving you from one unit to another.
No.
Still going
so
over,
within the
deploying.
within the same brigade.
Well, how did you feel about, you were being told 1 minute you're going to deploy, and this is kind of the fruition of your lifelong ambition to get in the dirt over there, to not going over to Afghanistan?
Initially I was sad.
Had been a little disappointing for you.
It was a little bit at first. Getting told you're going to do something great, and I think every young leader wants to show up with a combat patch on their right side, and it was a little bit of a hit to the ego, to be honest with you. But day one of showing up to my new platoon and getting to meet everybody, getting to meet my command team at the time, I said, "Yeah, I'm happy. I'm happy here. We're going to build a great team, and we're going to train hard, and we're going to have fun doing it."
Yeah. So, where are you at this point in 2016?
2016, so late 2016, Fort Campbell.
Fort Campbell.
Probably 7 months now on active duty, trying to find my way.
Yep.
Enjoying it at that time.
And then, what's next? What's next for you professionally, and then what about on the personal side of it, either with your family or camaraderie, relationships you're building? You didn't get married, did you?
No, did not get married.
Okay.
No.
Are you married now?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
So, late 16, finding my way, found a really good group of fellow officers and peers that, every day we go in and we compete against each other because you need competition. You need folks to compare yourselves to become better. Building this team, professionally speaking, starting to attend a lot of the CBRN focused courses. So traveling a lot of back and forth to Missouri, spent some time in Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico, where I really found my passion was nuclear planning and doing some stuff with that. So I was very fortunate. I had a boss at the time. Now he's Major Kistler, but at the time Captain Kistler. Didn't know how to really use me, didn't know how to use my folks, but was really attentive to, hey, here's the direction I think we should go. And it was nothing but supportive to send me to wherever we needed to go to become better warfighters and hone in on our technical skill. And so I did that for about 23 months before moving on to a next assignment.
Wow. Why nuclear? What fascinated you about the nuclear side of warfare?
So, I'll preface by saying I'm not a science guy by any means.
Yeah.
The policy side really kind of got my attention, and I went to a course, and we did some introductions, and found myself the youngest one in the room at the time. I was still a second lieutenant, and the course that I'd gone to was more for senior officers. So you had captains, major, lieutenant colonels there, and I found a sense of belonging in that community of planning at that echelon. There's something about supporting something bigger, and learning about some of the science and technology and utilization of how we look at nuclear warfare on both offensive side and defensive side, and just something kind of got a hold of me, and I haven't let go of it since.
You know what's interesting, the way you're talking, there's like a contradiction with you, where you're not a science guy, but you get into science. You're not into planning, but you get into the planning side of it. How did you feel about that process? Were you just kind of going along and learning new things this whole time, or were you still wanting to be on the front lines of being a hero?
So this is where you start seeing the mindset change. I really loved being a part of the team. Like I said, coming into the whole ROTC program, I wanted to be a part of the team, and so I kind of had a mindset change of being a part of the team doesn't always mean that I'm going to be in the front. It may be I'm in the back pushing people to the front. So I started to kind of change the way that I was thinking about my career in the Army, and it became less about what I wanted to do and more about how can I support people around me.
Did you have any conversations with senior officers that helped to shift that mindset, or your family, or was it more your own just experience?
I think it was just my experience. I would say I'm relatively reflective, and I find myself constantly taking a step back and just evaluating what's going on. And I found myself that I worked really, really well in a team environment, and I worked really, really well supporting a team, and found myself that planning was fun. I never thought I would say that. Planning was fun. Being a part of the support structure to help people was just fun. It was great, and I did well at it.
And so then what's next for you?
Yeah, so at that point, I was about halfway through my time as a platoon leader in the 101st, and I had a bunch of certifications complete, and it's kind of like, what, I don't know.
Are we to 2017 by this point?
Yeah, we're probably more towards 18.
Okay.
So a little over a year in my time as a platoon leader, and found myself on Facebook, and we've got a page for my branch, and I was like, I don't know what's next. Here's kind of a short resume. Here's what I've done.
You posted this on Facebook?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's to a private group, but private in the sense of like 10,000 people that fellow peers. At that time the commanding generals on the page.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a shot in the dark of like, hey, I'm looking for somebody to help me with what's next, and I got a reply back and it said, hey, have you ever considered going to the Ranger Regiment? And I was like, no, I hadn't, because I'm not Ranger tabbed. I'm not airborne qualified.
But you said the friend that you had made before was Ranger?
Yeah, so
she was one of the first female Rangers.
Yeah,
I think
so she had gone through Ranger school out of our bullet class.
Yeah, did you contact her and say, hey,
a little bit, but at that point I had friends at the 101st that were Ranger qualified, but none at the time were affiliated with the 75th Ranger Regiment. So I didn't know much about it. So I replied back, and I'm like, sure, I don't know what this is going to entail. So it's like, all right, submit your packet. And submitted my packet, and a few months later, say, hey, you want to come try out? And I was like, absolutely, let's do this. And so that was late 18. Went to RASP, which is the pre-selection for service in the Ranger Regiment in early 2019, and was fortunately picked up. So I PCS from Fort Campbell to, at the time, Fort Benning, now Fort Moore, and mid 2019 became the Deputy Regimental CBRN Officer for the 75th Ranger Regiment. So showed up there. Week later, found myself in Airborne School.
Okay.
So it was a pretty quick transition. So showing up, going right into Airborne
Now, at
School.
this point, is the planning out of the window, and now we're getting to do a whole bunch of fun, cool new things? Going to start jumping out of airplanes, and is the planning kind of your fascination with the planning kind of going out the window?
No, so at this point I was just along for the ride. You know,
yeah.
the opportunity presented itself, and you know, both my company commander and my battalion commander at the time were like, "You need to do this. Like we're forcing you to do this." So I didn't know what it really entailed, other than, you know, I'd always seen.
Why did they say that? Do you think that they had a career path for you in mind, or they just thought, here's the right fit?
I think it was a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I think that they saw that I was really hungry. I was ready to do something big.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, my company commander and I would sit down, and it's like, hey, this is what you need to do. And my battalion commander had worked with some special operations elements, and he was very candid about it and said that, you know, he thought that I was the right guy for the job, and you know, I just needed to show up and show out to this selection, and you know, if I got selected, then it's on to bigger and better things at that point.
Yeah, I think that's right. You know, I haven't known you very long, but I sense you got fire in your belly.
Yeah.
So, Airborne.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
What
show
was
up.
that? What was that like?
Oh man, Airborne was fun.
Yeah.
It was hot. You know, anybody that's been down towards Fort Benning and Fort Moore now in July, August knows how hot it gets. So running around with a chute on your back and a reserve on your front, doing stuff that, you know, a normal person would be like, that's pretty crazy. Why are you standing for hours on end, or why are you?
What did your family think about Airborne?
They loved it.
Yeah.
I don't think I was super vocal about everything that we did.
Right.
But you know, after every jump, you do 5 jumps to qualify, and so after every jump, it's, hey, I'm good, I'm safe.
When you grew up, did you do crazy stuff?
Not really.
Jumping off a bridge?
No, honestly, I didn't like heights growing up.
Okay.
Yeah, weird. I know. There's a lot of contradictions.
You're a man
here.
of it. A lot
Yeah,
of
no,
contradictions,
you know, my childhood is spent on the soccer field. You know,
Yeah.
outside of soccer, you know, I was a decent student. By no means was I an exceptional student. You know, I know my English teacher, Mr. Leachman's going to hear this interview at some point, and he'll agree with you to a certain extent.
Feel free to comment on the video,
yeah,
Mr.
no.
Leachman, if you're out there.
Yeah, no, not to go on that tangent, but you know, he shaped my entire career.
Okay.
He was vital to.
He got you thinking about being a student and learning.
Oh yeah,
Learning,
oh yeah. My high school years fundamentally changed by him. So incredibly grateful for his leadership and kind of his ability to yank me up and keep me accountable. But yeah, Airborne School. First couple jumps were great. I had a pretty bad landing on one that ended up rupturing my bursa sac in my elbow, and
Yeah.
you know, I was a little apprehensive on telling my family, because it's like, you know, I'm falling at, you know, 18 feet per second or so from the sky, and sometimes
Where's your fear of heights at? At this
so
point,
I
are you just
found-
over it? and
No,
it
so
doesn't
I
bother you?
found that as long as I'm moving and focused on
Yeah,
something,
yeah,
no issue.
Yeah.
It's the static heights of just, you know,
Yeah.
standing over a railing. Not a fan of. But I found my
Still to this day.
to this day, yeah. But my very first jump at Airborne School, I found myself as the first person out.
Yeah.
So #1 jumper. So you're standing there on the platform, just looking at the ground, waiting on the green light.
Yeah.
And I was nothing but excited. And
Wow.
I was like, well, okay, I guess I've somewhat beat this fear.
Yeah.
But
I've never jumped out of an airplane. I don't know what it would be like. I imagine in that moment I would be terrified and I would want to sit down.
You know, I thought I would too.
Yeah.
You know, you sit for 6 hours or so before you jump, and you know, in your mind you're working through every scenario of how am I going to do this, how am I going to do that. But you know, Airborne School does a really good job of making sure you're trained to where even in moments of panic, you know exactly what to do. And so, you know, I think a little bit of excitement started creeping up. You know, I felt my heart rate going, but the minute you exit that aircraft and your chute opens and you look up and you look out and it's nothing but quiet, and you're just like, that's cool, that's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
So it's fun.
So what happened when you were injured? Did that set you back?
No, it probably should have,
Yeah.
but I'm pretty hard-headed. And
Oh, okay. You just pushed through.
I did. So I ruptured my bursa sac and walked over to the medic and found that I dislocated my elbow. So my hand began to swell, with rupturing a bursa sac. I'm no medical guy by any means, but started seeing my hand became a claw. And so I was having trouble, manipulating small things with my hands. And the medical's like, hey, we're probably going to have to recycle you because you can't grab anything. So I was like, yeah, we're not going to do that. We're just going to kind of hide this hand. And so jump 4 and 5 were a little difficult, a little painful, but after jump 5,
You did the jump with one hand.
I found a way that I could
Just make it
manipulate
work.
stuff just with
Yeah.
a club of a hand. I wish I still had the pictures. You couldn't even see the knuckles on my hand. It was pretty funny, but it just was one of those things. Like, I didn't want to recycle. I didn't want to have to go through this 2 weeks of pre-jump again. I just wanted to get to my unit because I knew after this I was going to Ranger School.
Yeah.
So I was just ready to move on.
And so you did? You did
Yeah,
move
so
on to Ranger School?
yeah, so graduated from Airborne School,
And this is 2018?
this is 2019 at this
2019,
point.
okay.
So graduate from Airborne School and then immediately start getting ready for CERT, or Small Unit Ranger Tactics. It's the Ranger Regiment's pre-Ranger course, led by some of the most professional NCOs that I've ever seen before. They really, really help you get ready for Ranger School. So spent about 3 weeks doing that, and then off to Ranger School, and started Ranger School in mid to late 2019, and graduated in December. They say if you 62 and through is kind of like the goal. Every Ranger wants to just be done with the school, but found myself recycling a phase because of a failed patrol. But anybody that watches that's Ranger tabbed, if you didn't recycle, you're not a real Ranger, is what we say. But no, Ranger School was fun. A little tiring. At times a little stressful.
Yeah.
You don't eat much, but I spent it with an incredible group of both regiment guys as well as folks from the General Purpose Army, and it just made it really, really fun.
I'm sure your family was proud of you at this point too. I'm sure they were proud of everything you did. But if I was your brother, I'd be worried about you when you're jumping out of airplanes, and I'd be super proud of your Ranger service.
Yeah, they were supportive. Writing letters was incredible. Getting little care packages made it that much better. I think the funniest thing was seeing. I went to Ranger School a little thick. They say you can be as fat as you want as long as you can run a 5 mile in under 35 minutes, and you'll work the pounds off. And by God, did I work the pounds off. I went in at like 183, 184, and graduated at like 135. So I know my mom cried a little bit when she saw me at graduation. I was pretty skinny.
That's a good amount of weight loss.
I shivered my way through Ranger School.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, yeah. But it was fun. Just really, really cold.
Whew.
Yeah.
Whew.
The mountains of Dahlonega in late November, getting snowed on. Not super fun, but having a good crew around you that you can just look at each other knowing that this sucks, but we're laughing about it because there's nothing else to do other than pull in security. It becomes a little bit better. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And so then after Ranger School, what are you thinking when you're in Ranger School? Are you thinking long-term of some career path that you have in mind? You've got these now diverse experiences and diverse set of training and skill set. Is somebody guiding you, or are you just living in a moment and going experience to experience and just thinking what's next?
Yeah, so during Ranger School, I think my only thought was, when's the next meal? But post Ranger School is where things...
As you're losing weight, as
Yeah,
you're dropping
yeah.
close to 50 pounds,
Yeah.
you're thinking, what's next?
Yeah, but after Ranger School, show back up to the Ranger Regiment, and at this time things were pretty active in the CENTCOM area, and we responded to an event. So getting called into work at an odd hour, just kind of, all right, what's going on, and ended up having to some units went overseas to do some things, and they came back, and so kind of understanding like, hey, this is real now. This is, you show up to work and you may get a phone call saying, hey, someone's going somewhere and you need to be ready.
Were you excited about that
Very.
potential?
Very.
Okay.
As I said earlier,
Yeah.
I thrive in stressful environments, so getting a phone call in the middle of the night saying, hey, something happened and we're getting ready to send some folks over to do some things. So I worked that and then found towards the end of December or January that there was going to be a potential for me to deploy and go overseas. So ended up doing that.
Okay. So
we're
you
looking
did. That was your first deployment overseas?
Yes, yeah. So got kind of a notification of warm and fuzzy December 2019 into 2020 of, hey, there's a potential of you going somewhere.
And you were super excited still? And this is like the culmination of everything.
Yes,
for
yeah.
the first overseas deployment.
Yeah, and so still continued to train, was going off, found myself in DC doing some, this time was pretty invested in homemade explosives, kind of a advanced chemical, biological weapons course type stuff, more or less just honing in on those skills, and then COVID happened.
Yeah.
We got the notification of something
So this
happening.
is around 2020?
Yeah, so we got the initial notification of something going on in late February.
Okay.
So I ended up flying back from DC.
That was a crazy spring.
It was, yeah.
So back up a little bit. Did your family know you were going to be deployed?
No, at this time,
They didn't?
no.
Okay.
We had something set into place, like, hey, if I were to get a phone call
Yeah.
and I've got to go somewhere very quickly, we had a little plan as to,
Yeah.
who would handle things. But at this time, with it being, hey, you may go, it's like, I'm not going to say anything until I'm on that manifest. And at this time, it's like, let's keep where I'm going to myself and to my team.
And February, and those of you who remember the early, that spring when COVID started to hit, February is still kind of early days for that. Where I remember at that time thinking, this might not be anything, it might stay isolated, it might not spread. Were you thinking at all that COVID could really change the course?
No.
Yeah.
No. My unit and our higher echelon of Special Operations Command did a really good job of immediately starting to work from home. I think they just had, they made a good analysis of what this could be.
Yeah.
So
Boy,
we
that
started.
That was an early heads up decision.
So we started working from home relatively early before a lot of the major lockdowns started happening. And at this point, I found out, yes, 100% you are going to deploy. So, staying at home, we're working from home, getting ready to deploy, going to pre-quarantine.
COVID's blowing up.
Yeah. So it's a massive thing at this point, and so trying to find, the logistics of how do we get a certain population to a secure area to quarantine. So it was a unique challenge for our logisticians at the time to work through that entire process while trying to keep people from.
And where are you at now? Are you involved at all in the planning side of it?
Yes.
Or,
Yeah. So my cell, the protection cell up at the Ranger Regiment, we started Task Force COVID. So it was kind of Fort Benning, now Fort Moore. I'll just reference that Fort Moore now. Fort Moore had some requirements that they needed help with. Setting up isolation
everybody
barracks.
needed help.
Yeah. So my
Everybody
team
needed help.
kind of stood up Task Force COVID and helped where we could, and there was a lot of intervention at the medical level that we just kind of synchronized and reported. So that was exciting to do on the state side, and then Task Force COVID was still the same. We worked it in Afghanistan as well.
Did your family know that you were part of Task Force COVID? And I mean, I don't know about you, and I don't know about our listeners, but that spring, it sort of felt like the end of civilization, and it sort of felt like things were falling apart. Was your family scared? Did you feel like the pressure to kind of help your family out?
I did. I felt terrible being away from them. Thankfully FaceTime made up for that, and there's a lot of assurances of, hey, we're doing okay, we're healthy, You know, here's the things we need to look for. Here's how to keep ourselves as safe as possible.
Yeah.
And we just kind of continued to live as much of a normal life as we could.
Yep.
Just try to take care of ourselves and our health and put that kind of at the forefront.
And so you're planning to deploy?
Yes. So
at the same time you're part of Task Force COVID,
yes.
At the same time that this global pandemic is breaking out and people are fearful in this climate, I want to ask you, like, how do you get your mind around anything else? I mean, that spring especially, I was here teaching. It was tough to teach. It was tough to work with the students because it was like we're trying to get groceries.
Yeah.
For our family.
Yeah.
We're trying to survive this, and you're thinking about deploying. How did you get your mind around that whole situation? And did your family know you were deploying at this point?
At this point, whenever it was confirmed, you know, I did tell them. You know, at the time, I didn't tell them where. I just told them to the CENTCOM area, Central Command. So they knew I was going to a combat area. And, you know, through all of the stress of, you know, being a part of Task Force COVID and preparing to deploy and kind of working through what actually needs to get done, you know, my team at the Ranger Regiment was incredible. A bunch of leaders that just every day they wake up and they lead from the front. So I just knew that that's what I needed to do, and I knew I needed to take care of business and be a good team player. So, you know, that's where I just kind of
that mindset
I focused on just being
a
a team player and figuring out where I could plug and play and be helpful wherever.
Yep. And what did your family think about you deploying? You know, I remember when my brother deployed, honestly, my mom and I were scared to death. That was the most stressful, probably the most stressful time of our lives. Did they express any of that to you, or did they just say, you know, we're proud of you and
I think that
we love you? And
I don't think, you know.
I didn't tell my brother any of that. I just pat him on the back and said, love you.
No, there's a lot of love yous. There's a lot of, hey, we're here to support you, and we can't wait to have you back. But, you know, as I've said, my family's been supportive, and they know I'm out there doing my job, and they know that they need to be strong, and they did. They came together, and they were strong. And
they were all healthy at this point?
They were.
None of your family members had COVID at this point?
At this point, no. So they're supportive. They're excited for me because they knew how excited I was.
Are we to the summer of 2020 yet?
So I deployed in May.
Okay.
Started quarantine in April. The end of April, I pinned captain. So at that point, May 1st, I became a captain and found myself overseas in the middle of May or so. Came into a pretty kinetic environment working overseas. So I deployed, and I was the chief of operations for a joint special operations task force that oversaw any and all missions in Afghanistan. So it's pretty kinetic, you know, looking at it from a holistic Afghanistan standpoint. So immediately got on the job, and 12 hours on, 12 hours off. Just kind of let's go, let's do this thing.
I keep going back to COVID. I don't really want to go back to I don't even want to think about it anymore. But it had to have been on your mind as you're overseas. Again, this is still early, even that summer. I remember still thinking, like, things are going to get worse before they get better. That summer, I remember thinking, man, I might just take my family and go to Montana.
That wouldn't be bad anyways, whether it's COVID or not.
Yeah, Montana's beautiful. And you're overseas and you're in this kinetic environment. Are you worried about your family back home? Or are you just so busy doing what you're doing and handling your business? What's going on the COVID front at that point?
Yeah, so stateside, you know, COVID was, still booming. You know, talking to my family, I was always worried. I'm always worried about my family, making sure that they're safe. But
Yep.
where we were in Afghanistan, we were so far disconnected from other units, other Army units and joint units. We were kind of off on our own little compound that only certain people could access.
Yeah.
So the kind of that bubble of protection was already somewhat built in there.
So you're not too worried about the pandemic?
Not
where
at
you
this
are.
point, yeah, not at this point. I mean, we still had active COVID cases, but
Yeah.
the protocol was there that we could immediately isolate people, and the chances of it spreading were relatively low at that point. So
Yeah.
I think our job more or less focused on, let's look at combat operations,
Yep.
and if something happens with COVID, we'll take care of it. We've
Yep.
got built-in redundancies so that there's an overlap of coverage if somebody were to go down with COVID. You know, one team, one big fight together, we'll take care of it. So,
You know, I don't even know how any of us made it through here, and I was just doing a normal job, just teaching students in college. But to do it overseas on your first deployment, to go through a global pandemic and be separated from your family members, man, that's a hard thing. So you're busy, you're over there getting after it, and then what's next? What happens next?
yep, so redeployed, and then at this point we're starting to look at, okay, what's next as far as my career. So started looking at, you know, for our professional military education, the next step is a captain's career course. So you pin captain, you spend some time as a captain, and then you go to the, I guess, a more or less a qualification course with the goal of becoming a company commander after that. So I had the incredible opportunity to forego going to my basic branch career course and instead went to a joint one. So I hung out with the Marine Corps for 10 months in Quantico, Virginia, and did their version of Captain's Career Course, Expeditionary Warfare School. And I'm skipping a couple months here. So this is, we're looking at 2021.
Yep.
Yeah, I left the Ranger Regiment mid 2021 and spent some time in Quantico for about 10 months of schooling. Hands down.
And it was just a career path that
It
led
was,
for that
yeah.
transition.
So naturally, you have to go to PME every few years. I just kind of diverted a little bit from the Army side and went to the Marine Corps and still wore the same uniform. I was with 30 other Army officers, and we went through the course together. And to this day, one of the best courses I've ever been to. You know, can't speak highly enough of how the Marine Corps does their education and how just incredibly passionate those instructors were leading us through it and learning the Navy side of the house and the Marine Corps side of the house and all that coming to culminate as the joint planning process was really, really cool.
Yeah. I'm sure your family was glad to have you back stateside.
Yeah.
And how's the fire in your belly after your first deployment? Did you feel like, okay, I scratched that itch, I did that, now let's do something else? Or were you itching to get back?
Yeah, as the years have gone on, I've been more hungry.
Okay.
I've tried to find, my passion hasn't slowed down with what I do. You know, after leaving the Ranger Regiment, there's this feeling in your gut that I want to take everything that I learned and proliferate that to the rest of the Army. So you try to do that, and you try to be a leader and an example. And then, you know, being at the Expeditionary Warfare School, learning a completely different thing that has nothing to do with your branch. I think I did some chemical stuff maybe once or twice during my 10 months there, but you know, planning naval missions and planning stuff on the Marine Corps side was really cool. So the passion continued to elevate. You're a sponge. You're just learning and learning and learning, and then, you know, at that point I'm looking at what's next. So, you know, I started the interview process to become a company commander.
Did anyone in the Marines help you with what's next?
So there were a few people, but, you know, I was the only chemical guy there.
Yeah.
Out of the entire population, my branch sends one chemical officer there each year. So I was the one that got lucky to represent my branch there. So a lot of them were like, we don't really know what you do, because the Marine Corps, they're chemical folks. They're like on the officer side, it's just a secondary duty. Whereas Army, like that's my job.
Yeah.
So I helped with EWS, kind of like, hey, here's how you would use us in a battlefield. But once again, I had great instructors that just, hey, provide a recommendation as to what you want to do, and there's opportunities to go out back to units and do Army things. So twice a year, once in the fall to do like a 4-day kind of, hey, go immerse yourself back in your branch, and then 1 3-week long in the spring. So that's what I did.
Yeah. Okay. And so we're up to 2021.
Yeah, so 2021, started school in August of 2021 and got done with it in May of 2022.
Okay. And then what's next?
So I interviewed to become a company commander in October of 2021.
Yeah. Is this when you go out to Washington?
Yes. So
okay.
yeah, so I interviewed while I was still in Virginia for the position out in Washington. So Army's gotten really, really good about forecasting officer moves, which is awesome. So I found out, hey, right then and there before the end of the school year that you're going to go to Washington. So I was very excited. So graduate EWS and start the move out to Washington, and find myself taking command of a company in July of 2022. And here I'm 3 weeks out from wrapping up my time as a company commander, and it's been a whirlwind of emotion. It's been incredibly fun and challenging.
Yeah. Ever been out to the West Coast before this?
On road trips.
Okay.
I spent some time. I'm an avid mountain biker.
Okay, yeah.
So I take my truck
Washington's
out.
a good place to do that.
Take the truck out, and found myself in the Pacific Northwest once prior. Outside of doing visits for the Ranger Regiment, doing some visits out to one of the battalions out there, but this is my first time really being there.
Any family on the West Coast?
No.
Okay.
The closest family, 2 of my sisters are in Fort Collins, Colorado. But outside of that, no. It's just kind of me alone and unafraid out there.
Right,
Yeah.
that's right. And then I think what you're saying is what's next for you is to go to Georgia.
Yep. So
that's what's on the horizon.
Yep. So I went back to RASP, the selection program for the 75th Ranger Regiment, a few months ago, and was fortunately picked up again. So anytime officers move in and out of regiment, they have to go through RASP again, which is a phenomenal requirement, because it really evaluates, are you the right person for the job right now. So I got picked up in September. So here in 3 weeks, I'll start the transition back to become the Regimental CBRN Officer for the 75th Ranger Regiment.
Okay. And then beyond that, what are you thinking? Are you thinking, boy, you hope you get deployed again? I guess the answer is yes. I don't even have to look at you to know that. Are you thinking long-term of some career goals, personal goals? Do you want to get married? Do you want to have children?
Yes.
Do you want to eventually leave the service and enter civilian life and do something law-related? You mentioned an interest in the law.
Yeah. So, we try to build out like a 3 to 5 year plan on the professional side, and I'll spend my next 3 years at the Ranger Regiment, and then I'll compete for a intermediate level education, which is my next professional military education block. I'll pin major in early 2026. Outside of that, there's, I do want to go back to school. I want to get my master's. And I'm halfway through my Army career, and I've got aspirations to stay in the full 20. I'm still having a lot of fun, so why change that?
Yeah.
But outside of that, doing my 20 years, and I've got a pretty unique background with a lot of access to systems that I'd like to still use, whether it's on the DoD side of the house or something along those lines that I feel like I owe it to my country to continue serving in some sort of capacity that benefits the warfighter post Army career.
Yeah. And maybe sometime the fire in your belly will go down enough that you can meet somebody and start a family.
Yeah.
And if you decide to go to grad school, hope you consider a master's in history. And long term, do you want to get back to Tennessee?
You know, I don't know.
Okay.
I love Tennessee. I loved growing up here.
Mhm.
I don't know where I want to settle just
Mhm.
yet. Ideally, it's somewhere around here. You know, having a family here with close extended family
In
in the
Franklin?
surrounding area.
With all those other families, yeah?
Yeah, right. You know, I don't know. I guess I haven't really thought that far ahead.
Yeah.
You know, I think I find myself daydreaming about it every once in a while, but those same daydreams lead to me wanting to get in a big Sprinter van and go travel the U.S. So, you know, I don't know. I don't know just yet.
That was another COVID dream I had.
Yep.
Just selling everything and getting one of these conversion vans
Yep.
and touring in the national parks
Yeah,
across the country.
you see them all the time up in Washington, and
Yeah.
you know, it scratches the itch every once in a while. But it's like, why wouldn't I do this?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Well, it was a pleasure talking to you
Yes,
today. Thank you for coming
Thank you,
by
sir.
the center. Thank you for your service. It's Veterans Day weekend. I probably should have mentioned that at the start of the interview. That's why I'm dressed like this. We did a special function for veterans this morning. So thankful for all the veterans who have served, thankful for active duty, and thankful for all those who made the ultimate sacrifice for this country.